We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Friday FARcast. This is Robert Phoenix. I am your host, and today we are going to explore what I call the memory of music, and we're going to have Johnny Harper on as our guest today. Kit Walker was supposed to join us, but he has been unable to make a connection with his internet provider in South America, which is where he is currently living. So we're going to have to bring Kit back on another time. He's actually a really interesting guy and a very talented musician. So he would have brought a lot to today's discussion. Anyway, we're going to have Johnny Harper here on in just a moment or two. And the reason I have Johnny on today is because there is a viral video that's kind of going around, and it's Dr. Oliver Sacks has done this pretty interesting experiment where he's taken iPods into nursing homes with headphones, and he's plugged the residents of the nursing homes into music from the era that they grew up in, and the effects are actually quite profound in many ways. Not only are they sort of aroused from their semi-lethargic states, but they also have an increased cognitive function as a result of this. So obviously music is not just something that holds a sentimental value, but is also in some ways a time code that allows us to unlock portions of our brain that have laid dormant for periods of time. So we're going to talk a little bit about this with Johnny, but we're also going to talk about his project with the band, or it's not with the band, but it's his project that is honoring the band and their 45th anniversary of 3 shows that they did at Winterland, just as they were coming out of the Robert Zimmerman fold, Zimmerman, of course, being Bob Dylan. And we're going to talk about why the band is important and why music is important in general. And we're going to get into some of Johnny's other music as well. So let's bring him on all the way from the 510. It's Johnny Harper. Hello, Johnny.
Hi, Robert. Great to be talking to you.
Well, thanks for being on the show, and looking forward to our discussion here today because we had a nice little chat a couple days ago as we spoke about the power of music. We seem to be on the same page with that. Before we kind of get into your current project and some of the other kind of topics that we might cover today, maybe you can give people kind of a sense of your background and where you came from and why music is and has been an important part of your life?
It's something I've thought about a lot in the last year or two, is how far back this goes in my life. Actually, my father sang folk songs with a simple guitar accompaniment. He was not a performer. He never played on a stage. He just played in a living room for himself and his friends. But he played guitar and knew lots of great old folk ballads and folk songs. And I literally was learning the words to those songs, hearing him sing them when I was 2 and 3 years old. And some of those are still songs that in my solo folk performances, I still sing them today. So music has literally, and songs with stories in them, that has literally been a presence with me for my entire life. And it was great growing up with music in the home. I didn't think of myself at first when I was a boy. I always had an artistic bent, but didn't think of myself as a musician until I was in my late teens and started to play guitar myself. And at that point, it just took off, and I was drawing on things that I had learned growing up, and it just caught hold of me. Once I started playing and singing at the same time, it exerted a magic on me, a sort of a powerful pull that I couldn't ignore. It became almost instantly, once I started, it became my favorite thing to do in life. And I realized that was the path I was going to pursue. And I've been doing it ever since. So just my family background with learning folk songs from my father is definitely a part of the story. Another part of the story is that after a couple of years playing relatively conventional folk guitar stuff, Pete Seeger type stuff, and so on, I started two things happened that sort of provided me with a different focus. One was the way rock and roll exploded into a new phase of creativity in 1965 when Dylan came out with Like a Rolling Stone, the Stones with Satisfaction, and the Byrds with their take on Tambourine Man, and an incredible amount of great soul music was coming out right then, and AM radio was utterly irresistible to me. It again, just really reached out and grabbed me, and I got very excited about electric band music. At the same time, I had sort of moved on from hearing Pete Seeger-style folk music to a club in L.A. called the Ash Grove, where I got to hear a lot of the old masters of traditional American music styles. I heard, old-time banjo players like Clarence Ashley. I heard bluesmen like Skip James and Lightning Hopkins. I was being kind of bombarded at the Ash Grove by the very traditional roots of American music, and yet at the same time, meantime, there was all this great rock and roll happening. I sort of struggled to put the two things together, and after a few years, I came up with the idea that in order to play rock and roll as powerfully as I wanted to, I was going to have to learn all the root styles that had contributed to the evolution of American music to the point where it became rock and roll. I was going to have to learn the old blues. I was going to have to learn the old gospel and country music, and at the same time, try to keep up on how music was changing and the new innovations that were coming along. I had to both learn the old and the new, and that's kind of the path I have been pursuing ever since, through the many, many different styles of American roots music, the blues, the gospel, the country stuff, the folk ballads, and all the interesting developments in the electric music idiom. I remember being so transported when reggae first came along, and I was involved with that. So it's been a path of exploring the American heart and soul, I think, through exploring American music styles. And I've been doing that professionally now for a few decades and having a great time with it.
Well, that's a really interesting sort of tapestry of, various forms of American music, and also it seems like you've had a lot of dedication to try to bring it all together and bring it home.
Absolutely.
When you were growing up, because one of the things that really came through on that video that Oliver Sacks presented was the song or the piece of music that really triggered the gentleman in the nursing home was a Cab Calloway piece of music, cowboy track. So what was it when you were growing up that really grabbed your attention? That really said to you, this is something I need to pay attention to, either on a conscious level or even on an unconscious level, where your body, your heart, your emotions are all responding. What was it that you listened to and really grabbed you?
Well, when I was going back again to what I said about being a child, I sort of took music for granted, actually. I had it in my home. It was a natural part of life in my home. I didn't think a great deal about it. I just absorbed it. But one thing that I had a gift for was I loved songs that told a story, and I had a very helpful gift for memorizing song lyrics easily, and that has stood me in good stead my entire life. Without even thinking about it, I would hear the songs on records my dad played or when he was singing, and before long I knew all the words to the song. And there was even a sort of humorous family story that was told about something that happened to me in the second grade when to kill a few minutes at the end of a class period, my teacher asked, would anybody in the class like to sing a song? And she was more or less expecting something along the lines of Mary Had a Little Lamb, And I said, well, okay, I know some songs, I'll sing one. And I sang a song called Cowboy Ballad called Tying a Knot in the Devil's Tail, which is 14 verses long and is about two cowpokes who go to town and get thoroughly liquored up, and it's quite explicit about this, and then have an encounter with the devil on the way home, have a fight with the devil, lasso him and tie knots in his tail and so on. And I've come up from the hell's rim rock to gather in your souls, and you ain't getting no cowboy souls without some kind of a fight. I told this whole story in song at the age of 7 to my class. My teacher was kind of dumbfounded. She wasn't upset, just she said to my parents later, your son did this rather unusual thing, So I had the gift for songs, and especially songs that had a compelling story in them. I think that it came naturally to me. It was really a gift.
Yeah. I was watching Daryl's House last night, and with Daryl Hall, and he had Eli Paperboy Reed on the show, and they did a song by a group called the Volcanoes, who were from Philadelphia. They're from Philadelphia, part of a Philly soul thing that Daryl Hall grew up with, and so they're doing this song. And I've watched quite a few episodes of Daryl's House, and Daryl works pretty hard. He puts out, but there was something about playing this song from his youth that put just a giant smile on his face, and really, lit him up. And you could tell that he was going the extra mile in that performance. So I just think this whole notion of music and memory and triggering, sort of other emotions and times in our lives, not necessarily in a nostalgic way, but in almost a biochemical way, is a really fascinating kind of experience that we all theoretically share and have at our disposal, which may be a good segue into the band and your project. What is it about the band that drew you to doing this?
Well, first, I will say that hearing the band was a real turning point for me in my awareness of what I was about. I was 22, I guess, when music from Big Pink came out. I had been listening a lot to Dylan and the Beatles and other creative bands of that late 60s there. Big Pink came out. I was sort of mystified, but utterly fascinated by it. I played it over and over again. But then the second record came out, the one with The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and King Harvest and Cripple Creek and all of those on it. And in that record, they used a lot of folk instruments. They used the fiddle, the mandolin, the accordion, and the tuba, and as if they was partly a brass band, and they managed to capture within still still being rock and roll musicians, they managed to capture a lot of the wheezing, chugging, old time textures of earlier music styles, of the old folk music styles. They're all suggested in those songs, and this was the point. Hearing that record was the point at which I said, "Oh, I get it. The rock and roll that I've been so excited about for the last 3 years, and the traditional folk music, the fiddle players, banjo players, ancient bluesmen, and so on that I've been hearing in another part of my life, these all are part of the same picture. They're all in the same painting. They belong together. The band has shown that all of this stuff belongs in one room, in one picture." And that was really, at that point, I think that record helped me coalesce the take that I've had on music ever since, which is to both pursue the old and the new, the tradition and the innovation. And so that record really was a turning point for me, definitely, in my whole awareness of what I was going to do with music. And I've never forgotten the impact of those first few records, and then I saw them live a bunch of times, and they just, to me, they were kind of one notch up from every other group that was playing. They were an inspiration, just a complete inspiration that stayed with me through the years. I went through years of playing this style and that style. I played a great deal of New Orleans music. We might talk a little bit about that later, but something about the band stayed with me, and I kept coming back to their music and saying, I wonder if I can do something like this. And after reaching the point where I was writing my own songs and my own arrangements and had a band that was exciting to a lot of people, and after doing these things on my own, then it just seemed natural to me to come back to their music and say, now that they are gone, now that they're not here to play this music anymore. 3 of them are deceased, and Robbie Robertson never performs, Garth Hudson very little. That music is just not being played live in the world anymore. It's not being played on a stage. And I think somebody ought to be playing those songs for live audiences. And by now I've sort of grown into the technical level where I can pull that music off pretty well. And I think I owe it to the music to get out there and play it. And that's what led to this project of a series of concerts that we're about to do, playing the band's material.
Well, let's listen to one of the tracks. This is Life is a Carnival, and this is done by you guys, your band. And when we come back, we'll find out more about the dates and where you're going to be playing some of the band's music after we sample some of one of the band's best tracks in my estimation. So here's Life is a Carnival and Johnny Harper.
This house of mirrors, give away all the souvenirs. old world. Street is a sideshow, from the peddler to the corner girl. Life is a carnival, it's in the book. Life is a carnival, take another look.
That was Life is a Carnival by Johnny Harper and his band. Johnny, what's the name of your band? Is it the Hard Luck Band?
The band is actually has been called for years, Johnny Harper and Carnival, partly in honor of that song, and also partly in honor of the word carnival used as a synonym for Mardi Gras in New Orleans. It's carnival time in New Orleans, the songs all say, and so definitely, though, the band even inspired the name of my band with that song, and that's I'm singing there with my bass player Patrick McKenna and my keyboard player Neil Roston. The drummer is Rick Allegria, and then I also used a two-man horn section who will be with us on these band concerts.
So where are these shows taking place, and when are they taking place?
Well, these are all in the Bay Area. We're looking at possibly taking this down to Los Angeles at some point, but we're doing 4 shows in the Bay Area. We're doing an Oakland show at a place called Ava Nova on the 3rd. We're doing a nice hall in San Francisco, St. Cyprian's Church Hall on the 10th. We're playing up in Sebastopol up in the North Bay on the 23rd, and then down in the Santa Cruz area at Don Quixote's in Felton on June 13th. Those are the ones we have scheduled right now.
Good stuff. One of the things that I have always felt about the band that really separated them from other artists and acts is how they were able to somehow come up with the sound that was out of time, meaning like you can hear strains of the antebellum and all of this kind of turn of the century sort of dust and angst and hard luck tales and the Dust Bowl era and all that stuff really comes through their music in a pretty unique way.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, how did they manage to do that, Johnny?
That is such a fascinating question. I think that, of course, just sheer talent, just the sheer talent level in those 5 men, just assured that if you put them all together in a group, they were going to do something really special. When they were playing, before they went with Bob Dylan, they were playing first with a singer, an old-time rock and roll singer called Ronnie Hawkins, and then on their own. They were playing hardcore blues and soul, and they played it so powerfully and so great. I have a very rare live tape of them from those early days, and they play like a band that could stand toe-to-toe with Ray Charles or James Brown. They are incredible blues and soul players, and so they had cut their teeth on that form of roots music. But then when they got together with Bob Dylan and started, after they came off the road and started to play informally with him in Woodstock in the period that we now know is a legendary period of music, the basement tapes. At that time, Dylan's folk music background exerted a pull on them. And it wasn't like it was the first time they had heard traditional folk music. Robbie Robertson's earliest memories of music are playing old-time country songs with mandolins and fiddles and guitars on the Six Nations reservation up in Canada with his uncles. This is a folk music background that he had sort of forgotten about, but that Dylan helped reconnect him with. Levon Helm, of course, grew up in a family of old-time country musicians and learned fiddle tunes and folk ballads from his father. Rick Danko had played bluegrass duets with his brother when he was a teenager. So these guys had a folk music background before they became rock and roll musicians, and Dylan kind of reconnected them with that. They then said, okay, I kind of like this, going back to our folk music. This is, I imagine them saying it or just feeling it, that they wanted to evoke some of the folk music roots of the thing that they actually had in their own backgrounds, but still keep a rock and roll presence in it as well. And then the fact that Dylan was such an inspiration to them in terms of the way he wrote songs, the way his songs could suggest a whole story in a few lines. I think Robbie and Richard put that all together and started evoking the American past in the songs that came out of them. I mean, in a way, it's mysterious, and nothing I can say about it really quite explains it. But those were some of the elements that led to that fusion of an old-time traditional American presence with the band's rock and roll and rhythm and blues chops. Another thing, of course, that's been said about Robbie Robertson as a writer for a long time is that he, coming from Canada and being, when he started touring with Ronnie Hawkins and Levon, he, as a Canadian, was sort of seeing the American South and the American countryside, rural and small-town America, with fresh eyes. There's certain things that we took for granted, we Americans take for granted about our country and our culture. To Robbie, this was new and magical at a point where he was just starting to form his art, and he was taking in the experience of the road and rural America. And because he was coming to it with fresh eyes, he saw things in it that maybe we didn't, and he was able to write these great stories about dirt farmers having hard times and the Civil War and the people on back country roads and in little communities and stuff. The poetic muse was awakened in him because he was coming to it as an outsider, and he saw it with fresh eyes.
That's a great point. And yet he had, in the presence of Levon Helm, somebody who was from that part of the world. And
exactly. Levon embodied the thing that Robbie chose to write about.
Yeah, and I wonder if in the case of somebody like Levon, where, the individual can be almost like a genetic taproot to some kind of social memory, through music itself, and it can become kind of a point or a channel of evocation, and maybe this is why, in some ways, the band was able to conjure up those kinds of sounds that really are kind of resonant from that era of American history.
Exactly right, and I don't think it would have been possible for Robbie to write those Deep South stories and those backcountry stories without the presence of Levon, without knowing Levon and Levon's family, visiting them in Arkansas and being exposed to that as a natural part of life, as Levon's background in rural America somehow sort of transmutes itself into Robbie's awareness of the South and the country life, and he couldn't have written those songs without that experience, I think.
So we have two layers of memory, musical memory taking place here. We have the band and what they stood for and were able to express musically at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s. And then we have another layer of musical memory from another point in time in American history. And now you're bringing it all forward into this point in time in our current experience. Let's hear another track. Let's listen to W.S. Walcott Medicine Show. This is one that you and your band are doing and will be doing in the next three shows, or the three shows that are going to be taking place.
Right, let's go ahead and play that, but then I want to come back to Life as a Carnival and just make a couple of comments about that song as well. But go ahead and play Walcott first, and then we'll talk about them both.
Okay, so this is W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, Johnny Harper and Carnival. right, Biggest Walcott Medicine Show that was performed by Johnny Harper in Carnival. So you wanted to go back and talk a little bit about Life as a Carnival. What do you want to share with us about that track?
Well, really, both of these songs, Life as a Carnival perhaps a little more, but both of these songs, they bring out certain things about the band's style and about my approach to music that I think are really interesting. One of them is a hallmark, a signature of the band's style was their use of alternating lead voices. You know, they had 3 or 4 great lead singers, and they would frequently bounce the vocal back and forth within the same song among those singers, and you hear that in Carnival, Life is a Carnival. Take away, take away, take away, take away. All this house of mirrors, you know, the voices overlap, the constant dialogue, a musical conversation going on between different singers, which is quite unusual. But the band got that idea from gospel music. That's where the whole thing of the alternating and overlapping lead voices actually comes from. And they're very explicit about that. Robbie has talked about how their alternating vocal thing derives largely from the early gospel recordings of the Staple Singers and other groups like that. And so that's a really interesting example of a gospel influence in the band's music. Another thing that I want to mention here is that in both of those performances, which I did use the horn section on both of those, the horns for these songs were written by another of my very favorite musicians in history and in the world, Alan Toussaint of New Orleans, who is still going very strong and playing and singing absolutely beautifully today, and as he has been doing for 50 years more or less. Just a fantastic musician and a fantastic horn arranger, and he at one point in the band's history wrote the horn arrangements for a bunch of their songs. And I was faced with, in doing these songs, I had to really engage with Toussaint's horn writing, because he had written for 4 horns, 8 horns, 6 horns on these band tracks, and I had to boil down that arrangement on Life as a Carnival, which is very complex, different phrases and voices alternating in the horn section and so on. I had to somehow boil that down into a version that could be played by 2 horns, because that's all I can afford. And I worked very hard to adapt that jagged, jumping, exciting Alan Toussaint horn arrangement to a 2-horn section. I think it comes off pretty well. But one of the things that makes it work, of course, is that there's also a dialogue between going on among the other instruments. There are traded phrases back and forth between me and my keyboard player, between me and the horns. The whole idea of instruments working together like this in a sort of musical conversation where they're bouncing ideas and phrases back and forth. And that, of course, is sort of part of the essence of jazz right from its earliest days, is that musical conversation. And rare among rock groups, almost unique among rock groups. I think the band always had that going on.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely hear
the musical dialogue, the musical conversation. So when we do it, I mean, I actually even expand that a little more. You know, the band's arrangement of Life as a Carnival doesn't have the sort of guitar and organ conversation at the end of my arrangement. I built that in because I love that. Put me in a jam session and I will constantly start trading 4-bar phrases with another player. You know, it's a part of music that I really love, and that isn't honored enough, I think, is the musical conversation, and that's a part of what they do. Then within all of that, we're doing all of that in a song that is filled with provocative little twists and ideas in the lyrics. Robbie Robertson can't help himself. He's just going to write something that gives you a fresh angle, a fresh take on life somehow. Here he is writing about the image of a carnival, and he poignantly says at one point, take away this house of mirrors, give away all the souvenirs. This is almost like, I don't want to sound too academic here, but this is almost like Ahab in Moby Dick saying all the world is made up of pasteboard masks, and can we strike through the masks and reach reality somehow? Take away this house of mirrors. I hear that in Robbie's writing just constantly. He's probing what we are as people and what we think and what we feel in a way that I just think he's a great writer.
Well, he's a Scorpio, so I think you would probably go down that path. So that's a very Robbie Robertson-esque kind of thing. Let's play one more track. This is a different track. It is not a band track. It's something that you did. It was part of a project you were working on. It's a rendition of This Land Is Your Land. Is that right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I sent this to you. We haven't really touched on this theme yet, because when we were talking on the phone the other day, you said that one of your interests in doing this show was to talk about using music, what music can do for us in challenging times. And that so much resonates with me. I had done a series of shows in which we did electric band versions of politically powerful Woody Guthrie songs, and I want to talk more about that. But that has brought This Land Is Your Land in this rather unusual arrangement. It's brought it into my group's repertoire because we wanted to do it in a way that really spoke to the hard times we're living through in America right now, and then that's why I did it the way I do. You can hear it for yourself.
All right, so this is This Land Is Your Land. And again, this is Johnny Harper and Carnival. And when we come back, we'll wind down our time with Johnny, and he'll talk a little bit about kind of where we are politically and socially, and how music is playing an important role, or can play an important role in our awareness of that, and even potentially our healing of that. Here we go.
Early in the morning, by the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people. They stood there hungry. They were wondering if this land was made for you and me. But I say this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. And I roamed and I rambled, I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me a voice was sounding, this land was made for you and me. Yeah, but they had a big high wall there trying to stop me. Big signs said keep out, this is company property. But on the other side, y'all, it didn't say nothing. And I'd say that side was made for you and me. Yeah, 'cause this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Well, I went out and walked on that ribbon of highway. I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me those golden valleys. I said this land was made for you and me. Yeah, the sun was shining. I was strolling through the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling. As the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting, this land was made for you and me. I'll play one man. Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking my freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. No, no, 'cause this land was made for you and me. Yeah, this land is your land. This land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
That was Johnny Harper and Carnival doing their version of This Land Is Your Land. And Truth Nova in the chat room dedicated that to Cliven Bundy, who is engaged in a full-on I guess you would call it a full-on conflict with the BLM and some of their hired thugs just on the outskirts of Las Vegas. Have you heard about this at all, Johnny?
No, not really.
So just to fill you in, fill some of the audience in here who may not know what I'm talking about, Cliven Bundy is a rancher who has been working the land for a number of generations in an area, Clark County, just outside of Las Vegas. And he has a bunch of cattle on essentially what is state land that he claims that he has generational rights to. Now, one of the things that Cliven Bundy did is that he stopped paying his grazing fees, which opened him up in some ways to this kind of thing. But the BLM has come in and they basically have said that there is a land tortoise that is endangered, and they are moving his cattle right off the land right now, and they're taking it straight to auction. And there is a number of armed people. This is like a Ruby Ridge kind of Waco thing developing right before our very eyes. And there are a number of people that are in the quote-unquote freedom or truth movement that are starting to kind of gather in and around Bundy's ranch. So this is an interesting kind of event that's taking place right now, and it really brings up this whole notion of who owns the land. Does the federal government own the land? Does the state of Nevada own the land? Do Cliven Bundy's ancestors own that land? And beneath it all, literally and figuratively, is oil and gas and fracking rights, which are available in and around that area that Cliven Bundy is actually doing his cattle grazing on. So anyway,
I thought that was going to come into this story.
Yeah,
it so often does.
Absolutely, and the whole fracking piece is we could spend another hour just talking about fracking here and the effects of fracking, and not just the physical effects of fracking, but how it impacts our society and culture. Let's talk a little bit more about you and this, what we're kind of going over here, which is, music in difficult times or difficult, where people are going through challenging pieces in their lives, both personally and socially as well. This is something that you were really interested in sharing about. So let's talk a little bit about that, your perspective on it.
Well, everything that's an utterly fascinating story, and I'm going to have to make a point of following it at this point. That's a very compelling American story, and I'm so glad that you talked about it. It fits perfectly with the questions that are raised in the less well-known verses, all of which I sang, of This Land Is Your Land, and I actually, I sort of updated one line in that song where Woody Guthrie had said that he saw a sign saying, "Keep out, this is private property." I sing it, "Keep out, this is company property," because I really feel that is the biggest challenge to freedom and to fairness in America that we're facing today, is the power of corporations and corporate money to rule our lives, and I wanted to use, I'm sure Woody would have approved my using that little change in the lyrics there to express that concern in his song, which always reminds us that this country belongs to all of us, not just to the rich and powerful. And the gap, of course, between the rich and the rest of us, the power of money, the income gap, that's growing and widening all the time. And we never needed to hear songs like Woody Guthrie's, words like Woody Guthrie's, more than we need them now. And that's all part of what I was reaching for in that approach to his famous song. And certainly on a social level, we are facing massive challenges as to what our country is becoming or has become, what it stands for, where it's going, and when we come out, I mean, you and I'll just digress for 1 second here and mention that so far today, you and I have been working with my performances of the band's songs and now of an American classic, of course. But I do have an album coming out in 2 or 3 months that's mostly original songs, and some of those do address that concern and say, I have a song called "Looking for the Light of a New Day," in which I point blank ask America, where are we going? What is our path? What do we want to be as a country? And in the social aspect of music functioning in difficult times, Woody Guthrie songs are so relevant, and I try to add my thoughts in some of the songs that I'm writing for or have written for the new record. So that'll, we're all trying to add our voice and do our bit in the great conversation that is life in America.
Yeah, well, it's a really broad and interesting topic, and we're at a crossroads. We are at a crossroads, really, in the history of this country. And
I think so.
And I was just doing some research on Robert Johnson and the whole experience of being down at crossroads and selling one's soul, theoretically, for a mortal gain, immortal soul. And I think that we're at a point in time right now where that metaphor of Robert Johnson down to the crossroads, especially astronaut ran cross, is something that we really need to look at, and we really need to kind of, in our own lives, try to understand what we'll do or what we won't do for money or profit or greed or our own integrity. And I really get a sense here, Johnny, with you, that you've stayed very close to your own musical integrity throughout your entire life and your career, and the types of musical choices you've made and the path that you've kind of carved out here for yourself. So I really appreciate I appreciate you doing that and being on the show today And let's talk about, again, really quickly, where people can see you and can find you, more importantly, on the Internet.
Right. Okay. On the Internet, if anyone just does a Google search for Johnny Harper, the first thing that will come up is a biography of me on the webpage of the CUR Kerrville Folk Festival in Northern California, not to be confused with the one in Texas. And there's a good biography of some of me and some of the artists I've worked with over the years, and so on and so on. And there's also contact information at which people can email me or phone me. And anyone, I'm interested in hearing from anyone that's interested in the kinds of music that I've devoted my life to. So you can definitely just Google me. Also, by later today, the performances that you played, plus another one that you played the audio of Life as a Carnival and W.S. Walcott, and we have a version of Up on Cripple Creek as well. Those should be up on YouTube by later today, and all people have to do is type in a YouTube search for Johnny Harper, and you should be able to see us performing these songs. And the camera guys did a great job. It's a live performance, and people can check that out. And then, as I say, from the Kerrville page, they'll be able to write to me if they want to hear more about the shows, receive notice about them. I hope folks will contact me. I want to be in touch with the people and reach out to everybody with the songs I care about.
Well, this is an internationally listened to broadcast, so hopefully it'll extend your reach a little bit here, Johnny. Listen, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and it's been really great having you on, and we've covered some interesting ground, and music is always one of my favorite topics, and never hesitate to bring somebody on to discuss music and how it impacts us personally and culturally and all that good stuff. So best of luck to you on your show.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll catch up with you somewhere down the road, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, Johnny, you take good care.
Bye-bye.
That's Johnny Harper with Johnny Harper and Carnival. He is doing a tribute to the band in the Bay Area, and I know a lot of you are not in the Bay Area, but if you're in Northern California, go check him out. Go listen to what he is going to be performing, because the band, unlike, say, The Who, even though Keith Moon has died, they can stick in Kenny Jones or whoever they want to play drums. The Who can basically play again. I mean, even Led Zeppelin, if Led Zeppelin wanted to, excuse me, stick in Jason Bonham and play drums for his father, Led Zeppelin could play again. But the band really cannot play again. They are gone. They are a part of history. They're part of our past. And so when somebody does decide, and if you listen to the recordings, they're very similar to the band. It's not a cover. It's not a cover band. It is a tribute, and yet he's hitting some really similar notes that they did. So, check it out if you're in the Bay Area. And Johnny seems to have a lot of integrity as a musician. It was great having him on. All right, so we're going to do another 60 minutes of radio. And for the next 60 minutes is me, yours truly, and I'm going to kind of set the stage here. In fact, I might even read you my latest blog post before it goes up. How do you like that? How would you all dig that? I guess this would be kind of a white label pre-release of my blog post, which is going up today on the Cardinal Cross. And I talk about the crossroads with Robert Johnson as the archetypal American experience. And we, I believe, are at that point in time with our collective awakening. All right, let me play a little bit of music, and when I come back, we're going to get into some esoterica. What do I want to play? Should I bring it up maybe a couple of decades or so musically? Why don't I play, how about some Michael Hill? Let's play Michael Hill. Let's crank it up. Testing 1, 2, 3. I'll be back in 3 minutes and 6 seconds. You're listening to the Friday FARcast. I'm Robert Phoenix. This is Michael Lee Hill, testing 1 2 3, testing 1 2 3. Some really interesting news has just broken for those of you who are followers of such things, and it's maybe this is a precursor in some ways to the blood moon that we've been talking about. The U.S. has just decided to release Jonathan Pollard. So this is breaking right now. Jonathan Pollard, the spy. He was a spy. He was a part of the Naval Intelligence Group, and he basically gave untold secrets, the amount of secrets and codes and blueprints that Jonathan Pollard gave to Israel was staggering, and it earned him 27 years in prison, and now he's being released. I'm going to read this. This is from the International Business Times. It says a deal has been reached between Israeli and Palestinian negotiators to extend U.S. brokered peace talks, according to Middle Eastern news outlet Al Arabiya. As part of the deal, Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard is to be freed from his 27-year detention in the U.S., while the contentious fourth set of Palestinian prisoners are to be released. The American-born Pollard was sentenced to life in 1987 after admitting to passing on U.S. military secrets to the Jewish state whilst working as a civilian intelligence analyst for the U.S. Navy. The negotiations were on the verge of breakdown after Israel refused to release the Palestinian prisoners, and in retaliation, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas registered with 15 U.S. agencies against Israel's wishes. The new deal will see Israel release an unknown number of Palestinian prisoners and suspend settlement construction in the West Bank. In return, Palestinians will suspend their plans to join the UN bodies, including the Geneva Convention on the Conduct of War and Occupations. Abbas said he signed letters and accessions of 15 international conventions, thus bolstering Palestine claims to statehood in response to Israel's failure to release the prisoners. Kerry, this is John Kerry, previously said that both sides. Hold on a second here. You know, you can't read a damn story anymore without an ad coming through. You know what? Screw this. Screw it. I hate that. Okay, I apologize for that. You know, here I am. I'm trying to read something off their website, and I got to listen to one of their ads. The internet has become kind of a hassle, by the way. Does anybody realize that? It's been kind of a hassle. You know, with all the scripts that they run, you know, try to figure out what was the last 5 words that you typed, so they throw up an ad just in case you haven't thought about that thing in the last 5 minutes, and so you may want to just go run off and purchase that thing somewhere else. The scripts are killing the internet. Pop-ups are killing the internet, and the ubiquitous ad that just, you know, starts blaring, even if you've muted it 3 to 4 times and will not back down, are ruining the internet. Oh, by the way, there's Heartbleed. Have you heard of Heartbleed? Is it called Heartbleed? That's the new internet virus that taps right into your. I gotta download AdBlock. Absolutely right. So anyway, the United States apparently, now, this is amazing, right? And think about this. This is going on between Palestine and Israel, and the United States is going to offer up Jonathan Pollard, who is a criminal. He broke the law in this country. It's called espionage. He's a traitor. That's what he is. By any other name, he's a traitor. And so now the United States is going to offer him up because Israel and Palestine can then, you know, sort this thing out, and they're, you know, for however long this peace plan or this peace talk really will take place and adhere to. they may agree to certain things, but I'll tell you what, those agreements will be null and void. All you have to do is look up Kol Nidre, and you'll understand why. So Jonathan Pollard's about to be released. That's a big deal, and it's happening right on the heel of the blood moon. Now, I was talking about how we're at a crossroads, because we are at a crossroads. We are at a crossroads socially, politically, economically, spiritually, and astrologically. The astrological manifestation of the crossroads will take place in just a few short days, starting with the blood moon on the 15th, and we're talking about a lunar eclipse as well. So what I want to do is I want to read, without the wonders of the modern technology and ubiquitously running scripts on the internet, I'm going to read you my latest blog post, which is going to go up later today, and you'll get some sense as to what I am talking about. Of course, there'll be some nice visuals and other things that you'll be able to see on my website. So this is going to be the latest post, and it's based on the metaphor of Robert Johnson and the crossroads. Robert Johnson's life is littered with clues and symbols that historians and occultists get sweaty palms over. He's the perfect crossfade between historical persona and modern myth. He took at least 2 different factual names over the course of his life, Spencer and Johnson, not to mention the numerous aliases that he assumed when he traveled, staying one step ahead of angry husbands and maybe the devil himself. Johnson's second father was curiously named Will Willis, but went by the name of Dusty. Do as thou wilt. Little Robert Dusty would disappear for periods of time from his Lucas, Arkansas home. Lucas, of course, being the earthly surname of the bringer of light, and would purportedly spend time in Memphis, the city of kings. Johnson met and married Virgin Travis in February of 1929, the month of the cast-out revolutionary. She shortly died thereafter, giving birth. His contemporaries and relatives blamed the death on Johnson and his insistence on playing secular music, but perhaps there was something more going on. If Johnson were a musician in today's Babylonian network of recording, distribution, and live performance, the death of a wife giving birth would immediately be scrutinized as ritual sacrifice by certain inquiring minds. In life, timing is everything. It's not long after that Johnson travels to the famous crossroads where he allegedly sold his soul to the devil to play guitar like no one else. He would also have marriages and relationships with women named Estella, which is essentially Eastern Star, and a woman with the last name of Kraft. He would record his very first record on 11/23/36 with Jupiter in Sagittarius conjunct the galactic center and wounded Gemini and Chiron at 11 degrees, the astrological and numeric symbol of the Twin Towers, opening the gateway to temporal duality, magnetically captured and sealed for the likes of Page, Clapton, Richard, and Hendrix. It provided them with both the musical and darkly spiritual tableau as the rock and roll heirs to Johnson's blues-drenched mythos. While he was a very good harmonica player, his guitar skills bordered on embarrassing. That was until he returned to Hazelhurst and visited the crossroads. After his alleged meeting with Nick himself, Johnson started displaying chops that not only passed his rudimentary playing that people were accustomed to, but was so advanced and singular that he stood out in ways that made people question how he could play like no other guitarist of his time. He would live a life as a wandering minstrel, crisscrossing the dusty roads and paved highways of the South, though he did travel as far as Chicago, New York, and even Canada. He would eventually die at the age of 27 before he would reach his Saturn return, plucked like others as a fleshy harvest for the L. Why am I talking about Robert Johnson? Because the crossroads just outside of Hazelhurst is the symbol of our time as the Cardinal Cross approaches. We too are at a crossroads in our collective and spiritual history. Bankers are dropping like birds, planes vanish in a Neptunian fog of conspiratorial conjecture. Russian troops gather at the fringe of eastern Ukraine's border while Putin starts talking about Ukraine's massive gas debt, another Neptunian cipher. Apparently, Putin is hinting at a gold for gas and oil exchange, which would essentially sink the petrodollar. Thanks, Robert B., for that. Out on the edge of Vegas, just beyond the shimmering lights of illusion and loss, the Bundy family is in a standoff with the BLM over the fate of a land tortoise. But in reality, it's about gas rights, oil, and fracking. Again, Neptune's amorphic influence. Interesting to note that Bundy is one of the Illuminati family names that Fritz Springmeier outs. Is there a connection? Only Neptune knows, and it doesn't divulge its secrets in headlines, but sometimes tombstones can be quite telling. Robert Johnson has 3 of them, 2 of which are in Zion, Mississippi, one of which is a 1-ton cenotaph in the form of a stout obelisk, placed there by the Babylonian music mafia. Maybe it's so heavy and leaden that they didn't want Johnson's tortured spirit to chase them down and haunt them and their families for the next 7 generations. On April 15th, we're staring down the blood moon lunar eclipse, which is the first of 4 this year, all of which are associated with the Jewish high holy days. The word is out in the streets, so to speak, that we should expect mayhem, sacrifice, and bloodshed. Perhaps we've already had a taste. Just 2 days ago, Alex Schreibel, an average kid from an average family, attending an average high school in an average part of Pennsylvania, whipped out a knife and went on a stabbing spree, injuring 20 students. That's a lot of blood. Schreibel was described as a mild-mannered kid who came from a Brady Bunch-styled family. With all due respect to the rival family, it has been noted that in many cases the darkest and most devilish sorts are actually the pillars of community, church, and family. I'm not saying this is the case, but young Alex looks positively possessed. Remember Kubrick's Twisted and Dark, Picaresque, and Clockwork Orange was also named Alex. So perhaps the blood does flow in anticipation of the blood moon. There was a shooting as well at Fort Hood. Hood, of course, being the operative word here, and today there were supposedly 4 shooters at a Memphis high school. There is that city again, where there was a lockdown. I don't know about you, but if I were running some security company, I'd use all of these events to my advantage and do everything in my power to get more security into schools, shopping malls, and stadiums. That's where the money is. Just ask TSA and DHS, agencies who siphon off taxes and tax revenue for their livelihood. It's a genius business model because there are companies that have deals with both groups, which provide any number of products and services for our safety and security, of course. So why not expand the model? There's plenty of room for growth. I'm slightly digressing. Slightly. We're in Aries now. Sun at 22 degrees, and Mars is in Libra, and Uranus is in Aries, and people are feeling it. The Sabian symbol for today is the gate opens to the garden of all fulfilled desires. What would happen if you could channel your angst, fear, and apprehension in the other direction? What if we, at this crossroads of the Grand Cross, with the blood-dripping moon and the looming solar eclipse, could consciously use this energy to liberate us from the chains of our shadows and activate the 4 essential elements of cardinal magic? Mars in Libra is a dedication to uphold fairness and justice in our own lives and to actively tend to the needs of relationship. Jupiter in Cancer is the expanse of nature, of nurturing and care that is like the clear water of the wellspring which gives source to all life. Pluto in Capricorn is the dedication and commitment to master and climb the steep angles of our ascent, wherein we face our greatest fears along the way. Will we fail? Will it all fall apart as the systems-based holographic dissolve fragments around us? Uranus in Aries is the spark of creation, the dynamo of the will. When aligned with the soul, it becomes a force for novelty and innovation. It's all there. And with the upcoming grand water trine as well, descending down from the heavens, the sweet surrender of compassion And catharsis is also waiting to be manifest. All the elements are here. Period. We have given our voice to our fears, and we have rooted out most of the damned and disastrous that we can never be quite that sure. And even if there is an evil plan afoot, this is our time as much as theirs. Remember that. If we're at a crossroads, then take the right path all the way back home. Really, the choice is and always has been yours. Now, that last line, it took me a while to try to figure out if that last line really worked for a number of reasons. Because I've been having some discussions with people over the last few days about whether or not we have any true will, whether or not we're all just programmed, whether or not we're all just running a script. And even when we think we're being novel and inventive or liberating, that we're all the only thing that we're doing is playing out some form of probability. It's an existentialist dilemma, and I think it's one that's worthy of talking about, and maybe we can talk about it on a future show with some other people. But at the end of the day, we do have choices, and we can make choices. And one of the things that is, I think, telling around this aspect and this potential that we have to make choices is how we feel after we make them. It's really simple. It's called conscience. We were born with conscience for a reason. And we have done our best to suppress conscience. I know I've done it. You know, we all do it at times. But that conscience, that's the voice inside of ourselves that tells us potentially we are straying off of our path. And our conscience is different than our programming and our patterning. Our conscience is universal. Our programming and our patterning could tell us to be doing something completely different. Right now, the current program and patterning is to basically do whatever the hell you want. Do whatever the hell you want, as long as it feels good. If it feels good, then that's really the barometer. That's the marker. This is a socially manipulated form of emotional expression and leverage. And we see these examples over and over and over and over again. But our conscience, our voice, that is really the navigational signpost inside of ourselves, is the true signal that if we listen to it, really listen to it, we'll get everything we know, and we'll know what the parameters are in which we can work with. Now, sometimes our conscience demands that we stand up for truth. That's part of our conscience, and hopefully it is. Hopefully we haven't lost too much of that along the way. Part of our conscience is another venue of expression which allows us to stand up for people that are in lesser straits than we are. It's in our conscience. It is hardwired into us. But what's happened over the course of the 20th century is that we've all been part of what I would call a collective manifestation of the cremation of care, which is the ritual murder and slaughtering of our conscience. And I think once we slaughter our conscience, or once we participate in the ritual sacrifice of our conscience, then our soul is not very far behind. Now, I've had a number of discussions about this with Katie Galante, and we have talked about how the cremation of care is essential in terms of the development of the psychopath, both on an individual level and on a social level as well. And so what we're dealing with right now, at the point of the crossroads, Cardinal Cross, is where is your conscience? Do you want to be a social psychopath? And you may not even know it. You may not even know it. You may think you're doing the best thing in the world. You may think that what your work, your light working, is one of the most powerful tools in the world. And it's vital, it's important. Well, you may not necessarily be totally dialed in on that. So, we're getting into this place where I think we have an opportunity, and I really think that this opportunity exists over the course of the next few weeks. And this is an opportunity where we can make profound change in our lives. There's a lot of energy that's available, a lot of energy. And if you choose the right path, right now, over the course of the next 3 weeks, then your life will reflect those changes, I think, almost immediately at a deep, deep level. And what is the navigational tool of that right path? It's inside of you. You know it. You know the choices you have to make, period, end of story. Because I think we're all coming at crossroads in our own lives, in our own ways, and we add them all up and we come to the cultural and societal crossroads of the cardinal cross. Now, the blood moons are going to happen. There's nothing we can really do about them, except maybe pray and notice them, right? And bear witness to whatever takes place. But I'm telling you right now, with all the research on the internet, with all the people doing work, and there are a lot of people doing this work. Some of the people you are familiar with, the Cliff Highs, the Courtney Browns, or the Mark Grays, or whoever you follow or into, there's a lot of exposition happening. And when there's exposition happening, then these things get to come out into the atmosphere. They are talked about. And as we do this, there are two things that occur. One is we drain the power from them. And two, I believe we are changing the event canon. That's why I think we're getting a lot of fake events, because we are in some ways altering the holographic projection of these events, which are meant in some ways not in some ways, but they're meant, period, end of story, to bring us into a state of mental, emotional, and spiritual slavery. That's what it's about. Speaking of which, I also want to talk about another level of revelation which just came to my attention just this last week. Some of you may be familiar with Karen Hudis. She's making all the rounds on the talk show circuits right now, Project Camelot. She's on Patriot Networks, you name it. Karen Hudis, supposedly a whistleblower from the World Bank. Do not fall for that story. If you, I have it up on my Facebook wall. There is a great piece which totally dismantles Karen Hughes and talks about her husband, and her husband who works for the IMF, and her husband is one of the architects of the new model for the new currency, which would take 33% of the planet's resources. Think about that. 33% of the planet's resources. Those would be cordoned off by the IMF, and a new global currency backed by these resources would then be launched into the public, into the marketplace. And of course, what is Karen Hudis talking about? She's talking about the end of the dollar. And she's talking about the beginning of something new, something else. She is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And her husband is an architect of the new dollar, or the new currency. You can look it up. You can go to my Facebook page. Karen Hudis, not to be trusted, okay? She's also the person that's trying to get a constitutional convention. Would you trust this person to run a constitutional convention? What would happen during a constitutional convention? I'll tell you what they would do. They'd strip the Constitution. And they'd come up with something new and something probably much more in their interests. Trust me on that. So there's a lot of expose and revelation going on, and this is happening on a number of levels, even in our own lives. The last time that the Cardinal Cross came through for me, at least the three-quarters of it, which was in January, February, I really had a massive wake-up call in my own life. And I've been trying my best to integrate what took place on the heels of that ever since. So here we are again. And, every time we go through these things, theoretically, I wouldn't say it gets easier, but we become more accustomed to the energy and working with it. So it's available for you, and it's available for you right now, even as we speak. And I know things are really challenging for people. They're really challenging, and I don't want to trivialize the challenges, or to turn them into some kind of, superficial, axiom that can act as a soporific or a placebo. The challenges we face in our life are very real. They're very real. We are at the precipice of major change in terms of the economy and technology. We've been talking about it for a while, and the rise of the transhumanist collective, the rise of the transhumanist state is really right upon us. And this is one of the big challenges that we're all going to be staring down. So with that comes unemployment, underemployment, all kinds of other things. So we have it now. It's all here now. It's all right now. It's now. The crossroads is now. Maybe the crossroads has always been. But here it's staring us in the sky and in the face, staring right back down on us. All right, I'm going to play another piece of music, and I'm going to come out of the music, and we're going to kind of wind the show down a little bit, and maybe talk about next week's show as well. So let's get into what do I want to play here next. It's a musical day. It's a musical Friday. Music is great, isn't it? Don't we love music? This is Julia Free. She's been on the show, and this is a very kind of earthy, Jupiter and Cancer kind of vibe. Turn the soil, Julia Free. I'll be back in 4 minutes and 48 seconds, and I'll rant some more, and then we'll cut on out of here and get ready for the big weekend. Here we go. That was Julia Free, Turn the Soil. I want to give a shout out to a good friend of the show, John Trudell. John is going through a really rough time right now. A lot of people don't know this, but John has been struggling over the last few months with bladder cancer. And he's getting a lot of good care and a lot of good support and love from people around him. And John is one of our national treasures. He's an asset in the best sense of the word. And we certainly hope that he recovers and gets back on his feet and continues to walk the right path. So I wanted to read you this story as it relates to some of the transhumanist or the technological nightmare that we're staring down. This is a Uranus and Aries sort of, I don't know, what you would call it, the Uranus and Aries triple Sunday, because it has all kinds of Uranus and Aries elements in it, chock full of Uranus and Aries nuts and cherries and all kinds of oozing hot celestial fudge. The ATF is going to monitor gun owners with drones. This is true, boys and girls. Let me read you this story. The Attorney General, one Eric Holder, who I think might be Stedman, Oprah's boyfriend. If you haven't seen the two of them together in pictures together, you should check it out. It's kind of interesting to see how similar Stedman and Mr. Holder look. At a House Judiciary Committee hearing today, Attorney General Eric Holder confirmed that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, I guess that'd be the ATFE now, the ACFE, was in the process of building a fleet of domestic drones. In sworn testimony, Holder confirmed that the ATF has already spent over $600,000 on the program and is in the process of trying to bring the drones into their surveillance arsenal. Last year, we reported on how the maker of the Shadowhawk drone was actively promoting its technology as a way to monitor citizens who carry guns. Now it looks like we have another government agency planning on using this technology to do exactly that. Holder told the committee, within the department, the only component that uses these vehicles at this point is the FBI. The ATF is in the process of working through to see if they want to make use of them. But as we've reported in the past, there are actually a number of agencies with federal governments who are already operating their own fleets of drones for domestic surveillance. In fact, last year, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed they were purchasing a fleet of Predator B drones for homeland operations, the same drones that are used in the skies over Afghanistan. A Predator B drone, by the way, is a drone that can fire on people. They can fire on people. We're going to have Predator drones flying around our skies. Around the same time, the state of Nebraska told the world that the EPA was using drones to spy on state farmers. It was later confirmed by EPA officials who said they were looking for people violating the Clean Water Act. Soon it'll be the Clean Food Act or the Food Act. Whatever it is, drones are going to become part of our lives. They are going to be the guardians of the guardians and the spies of the nanny state. How are people going to respond to this? What's their conscience going to say about the release of drones? Now, here's the other side of this. The other side is they're always going to have something that is going to be quite convenient as far as drones go. So getting your burrito or your pizza or even a six-pack of beer delivered to you without even leaving your home will appeal to especially the Silicon Valley types who dig that kind of shit. But there will be the convenience aspect of the drone too. Oh, but drones bring us some good things too, don't they? They bring us hot pizza on demand, and we don't even have to tip them. This is the future we are staring down. This is the crossroads we are at. So the militia, apparently, staying with the Uranus and Aries angle, is supposedly on their way to the Bundy Ranch. They're on their way to the Bundy Ranch. And what militia we're talking about, I don't know. Let's try to find that. This is from the website offgridsurvival.com. I'll read this one to you too. I'm in a reading mood today. Over the last week, we have extensively covered the showdown at the Bundy Ranch in Clark County, Nevada. Today, things took a turn for the worse as militia from around the country mobilized and started making their way into Nevada. The showdown started when federal officials sent in armed BLM agents to steal Cliven Bundy's cattle and in the process closed off 600,000 acres to the public. This land, which is used by hunters and fishermen throughout Nevada and Arizona, has been officially closed down by the BLM, who says it will remain closed until at least May 12th. But many in the area are warning that this is about much more than just Cliven Bundy and his cattle. In fact, many people believe it could be about stealing mineral rights and handing the land over to oil shale development. According to documents from the Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology, over the last couple of years, a number of exploratory drillings have been set up within the closure zones. Whether this is about oil or yet another attempt by the feds to limit states' rights isn't really clear at this point. What is clear is this is much larger than the Bundy family or their cattle. And if the process of shutting down the land, the BLM suspended free speech in the area and has actually set up so-called free speech zones away from the ranch. That's right, federal government has actually banned free speech on over 600,000 acres of public land. Dave Bundy, son of Bunkerville owner, rancher Cliven Bundy, spoke to us about what the BLM is doing and how he was beaten down by federal agents for taking pictures outside of these free speech zones. Over the weekend, while attempting to document the theft of his father's cattle, Dave Bundy went onto his father's land to take pictures of the cattle roundup. In the process, he was confronted by armed BLM agents who threatened to arrest him. Bundy told the BLM officers, "How can you arrest me? I am exercising my First Amendment rights to be here." When the BLM officers started advancing on him, he dialed 911 in an attempt to get county officers to help him. In his words, "I called to let them know these guys were getting vicious." While he was on the phone with 911 operators, he says the BLM officers then attacked me like a wild pack of dogs and started stomping and kicking me in the head. He doesn't look very good. He got beat up, this guy. When asked about the BLM's claim he was resisting arrest, Bundy told me, "I was exercising my First Amendment rights. But you really can't even consider what I was doing as protesting. All I was doing was taking pictures. I honestly never thought it would come to that." So it says here, Cliven Bundy is actually the last of 52 ranching families in the area. Over the past couple decades, the BLM has systematically regulated these ranchers out of business, canceling permits and laying claim to large areas of their land in the process. Local farmers are warning that this is likely to spread into Arizona and Utah and voiced their concerns at a town hall meeting in Moapa, Nevada last night. Now, remember what I was talking about earlier, that the plan here, based on the IMF, is to take over 30% of the world's land and resources in order to fund a new currency. Remember that. And this would be in alignment, or it would be close to that type of trade-off for land and resources and currency. So again, we seem to be at a crossroads in the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada. So I see in the chat room you were hoping about a pep talk about the current transits. I gave it. Gates, I gave it. I gave the pep talk. This energy is available. You can use this energy. Let me read it. Let me go back into what I was talking about. The current transits. Mars and Aries. Mars and Aries is about standing up for these things. It's about caring. It's about attending to commitments inside a relationship. It's about standing up to injustice. That's Mars and Aries. Do it in your own life and then move it outwards. Pluto in Capricorn is facing your fears. Think of ascent. Think of climbing up a mountain, because that's what Capricorn is. It is a mountain. It is an icy crevasse. That's what Pluto in Capricorn is. We are ascending, and it is not for the faint of heart. That's what we are doing. And when I say ascending, I'm not talking about some sort of, fourth dimensional ascent. We are ascending in our own realization of our conscious awareness and our own individual truth. We're ascending, and it's hard, it's difficult, it's challenging. But we press on. Why? Because we have to deal with Pluto and Capricorn. We have to deal with the corporatocracy. We have to live in some ways. In some ways, we have to live our lives accordingly. We have to assume the role and mantle of CEO in our own lives. That's what Pluto and Capricorn is. It's about taking control, taking charge. And don't look back, and certainly don't look down. You got to keep your point on the peak, on the ascent, and keep moving. Whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you value, do not give it up. Okay? That is the pep talk. In my own life, I'm faced with challenges along these lines. For roughly 5 years of my life, almost on a weekly basis, my ex-significant other told me to go out and get a real job, even though we had been divorced. And there was considerable pressure because I share a child with this person. And that, my fear of losing the child and all the things that go along with it were triggered traumatically when I was here, go out and get a real job. Go work at Starbucks. Well, what did I do? I kept putting one foot in front of the other, and I've moved up the mountain. That's what I did, my own personal mountain. And that's what you need to do as well. And even when you get to a certain point, it doesn't mean that the journey is done. Right? For me, the manifestation of getting up to the top of that mountain was getting a show on Gaiam TV. And I've done some really good work on Gaiam TV, and I love it. And people enjoy what I do. But guess what? That's over. They put my show on hiatus. Okay? So now I got to keep going. I've got to do something else. I'm on the other side of the mountain. I'm down in the valley now. And I've got to figure out what's down in that valley. It's an interesting journey, let me tell you. So you've got to keep going. That's Pluto and Capricorn. Uranus and Aries, you have to use your innovation, your creativity, and exercise your will. And use your will in a way that is creative. Think outside the box. If somebody is giving you a scenario, if somebody is telling you that a plane went down because 4 guys held patents, you may want to think about that twice or 3 times. Maybe there's some other scenario. Maybe you've lost your workers who are supposed to come work for you in your property over the summertime. Well, guess what? You've got to think on your feet, and you've got to be innovative, and you've got to be spontaneous, and you've got to be creative. You have to have solutions, and you've got to have them quickly. Everything is speeding up, and it's getting us to be more in the now, the dynamic now, not the pensive, contemplative, reflective Zen now, the dynamic now. Jupiter in Cancer is a response. It's a care response. It's about caring for your community, for your family, for generations to come. Make choices based on that. You do all of those things, and you are engaging with the energy of the cardinal cross. And at 13 degrees of each of those aspects, it represents death. It's the death of the old way of doing things. Change your script. Be dynamic and change your script. These are cardinal energies. These are initiatory energies. These are catalytic energies. Nobody's going to do it for you. You may get some help or some assistance or some support from people that are doing the same thing. that have their oar in the water and are paddling in the same direction. This is the crossroads. And if you don't, somebody else is going to do it for you, and you won't like it, trust me. There is my pep talk. Was that peppy enough? Put a little spring in your step? There we go. That's what I have to share with you today. That's my inspiration, if I have any inspiration. Because we move on. We move on, we adapt, we grow, and we share. We share our victories, and we're not afraid to share our setbacks either. I just shared a setback with you. In my mind, theoretically, a year ago, that could have been a real setback. It's not a setback anymore. It's not. It's an opportunity for me to do something else. It's an opportunity for me to engage Uranus and Aries. That's what I'm talking about. By the way, I've been replaced by Daniel Pinchbeck, whose revolution failed mightily. I have to say it. Wave of inaction, failed mightily. But you can now see Daniel Pinchbeck's videos over again. Look, Diam does good work. I love Jay. Jay's a good friend. Jay's a good friend, and he's offered me a great opportunity. And there's still some wonderful programs on Diam TV. William Henry's program is terrific, really terrific. And I do like what Regina does. So it's still a resource for you to tap into. And who knows, I may be back on there. But for now, I'm not. And I have to live my life accordingly. Okay? And that's the way it is. And that's my cardinal cross. That's my energy. That's what I have to deal with. All right. So we'll be back next Friday. And hopefully I'm going to try to get Dave Parker on the show. Dave lives here in Austin, and he has the Free Energy Party. He's a really interesting guy, super interesting guy, and I'm going to try to get him on the show. We're going to talk about free energy, what the Free Energy Party is all about. So we'll be back into the swing of things next week, all things esoterica, probable, possible, and potentially even conspiratorial, but hopefully hopeful. Because that's what we need. We need a new dose of hope, a new version of hope that realigns with our faith, and our faith that we can transcend and transform our current state and difficulties, the conditions that we all find ourselves in. So until then, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart just to open what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'd like to thank Johnny Harper for being on the show and getting into the musical swing of things, talking about the band and the magic of music and memory and all that good stuff, and how music can really help us through difficult times, both personally and collectively in our lives. Take us out, Philip K. Dick. I'll see you next Friday. Have a great pre-eclipse weekend. Adios.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.